Welcome back to the Explainer. Okay, today we are taking on what is undeniably one of the most frustrating, head-scratching parts of the IELTS test. You know the section, it's the one where your brain just hurts, the audio's absolutely flying by, and honestly, it feels like traps are just everywhere. Well, our goal for this explainer is to completely conquer this. We are going to master the most challenging question type you'll face in the IELTS listening test, the dreaded multiple choice question. So let's jump right in. Right off the bat, let's shatter a massive myth. Ask yourself this. If you hear a word from option A in the audio track, does that automatically mean option A is the correct answer? A lot of test takers, especially when the clock is ticking and the stress is high, think multiple choice questions are kind of easy just because, hey, the answers are sitting right there in front of you. But here's the hard truth. Absolutely not. Hearing the exact word is very often a cleverly disguised trap. It's designed to test your actual comprehension, not just your ability to match words. To stop falling for these traps, we're going to use a highly structured, systematic approach today. Here's our roadmap. We'll start with the keyword trap. Then we'll break down the 5-step method. After that, we'll look at dodging the 4 traps, navigating tricky formats, and we will finish up with why you absolutely must follow meaning, not words. All right, section 1, the keyword trap, and exactly why MCQs are so extremely tricky. This issue gets incredibly aggressive as you hit sections 2 and 3 of the test. Suddenly, the audio shifts from these simple little monologues to complex, multi-person discussions, and the options, they get much longer and way more complicated to process. So, the golden rule you need to internalize right now is this. IELTS intentionally uses exact keywords as bait. Picture this. You're in the exam hall, you're stressed, the audio is playing, and suddenly you hear the speaker clearly say library. Your pencil immediately jumps to option B, right? Because it matches perfectly. You feel this huge rush of relief. But wait, the speaker just kept talking, completely rejected the library idea, and ultimately chose the student center instead. Hearing the keyword is the trap. Hearing the final agreed-upon idea is the correct answer. You always have to wait for that resolution. To beat this, we need a foolproof framework, something you can deploy the very second your preparation time begins. Let's move into section 2, the 5-step method. This is your system for success. Think of this 5-step method as your ultimate survival toolkit. 1. Read all options. 2. Find keywords. 3. Predict paraphrases. 4. Listen for details. And 5. Eliminate traps. But here is a crucial reality check for test day. You know those 30 seconds you get before the recording actually starts? That is tactical planning time. It is not free time to look out the window, sigh heavily, or daydream about being anywhere else. You've got to hit step 1 the literal second you're allowed to. Now, when you move to step 2, finding good keywords is a bit of an art form. It's really all about ignoring repeated filler and highlighting the actual differences. When you're staring down 3 incredibly long, intimidating sentences, please don't underline every single word. That just creates visual noise. It wastes your brain power during an already stressful track. Instead, underline what makes those options unique, like contrasting practical activities directly against experienced teachers. Find the difference and your brain will instantly know what to listen for. And because IELTS really hates making things easy for you, you're rarely going to hear an exact match anyway. You've got to anticipate paraphrases. If an option says cheap, you should be actively listening for a phrase like reasonably priced. If it says difficult, expect the speaker to call it challenging. Interesting is almost certainly going to become fascinating, and a word like increase will turn into rise. You're listening for the underlying meaning here, not waiting for a perfectly matched echo. Which brings us nicely to section 3. Dodging the 4 traps. Welcome to the minefield. Trap number 1 is what we'll call the first idea. This is where the speaker mentions an option right out of the gate, giving you this totally false sense of security. But then, they use a contrast word to completely change their mind. You might hear, I'd love to go to the museum, and you start checking that box, but actually, it's closed today. Boom, trap sprung. The moment you hear words like but, however, actually, instead, or phrases like in the end, we decided, you need to treat them like loud alarm bells. They're changing their mind, and that first idea was nothing but bait. Trap number 2 happens when you hear the correct key word, but there's a totally wrong detail attached to it. Say you look at your paper and you hear the exact word Monday, spoken super clearly in the audio. But if the surrounding conversation just changed the final plan to Wednesday, the whole context shifted. The detail changed. That means Monday is absolutely not the correct answer, no matter how perfectly you heard it. Traps 3 and 4 demand a much higher level of focus, really, because you have to listen beyond just the hard facts. You're listening for human feelings. Did the speaker sound genuinely surprised? Did they only reluctantly agree? Trap 4 is especially brutal in those multi-person discussions. You must continually verify whose opinion the question actually wants. If the question specifically asks for the tutor's opinion, but a super eager student is the one talking for 2 straight minutes, you can't pick the student's idea. I don't care how incredibly articulate they sound. You just have to patiently wait for the tutor to finally chime in with their actual verdict. Eventually, of course, standard MCQs won't be the only thing they throw at you to ruin your day. Let's look at Section 4, Navigating Tricky Formats. These are your advanced strategies. Sometimes you're going to face formats where you have to choose 2 letters out of 5, or you'll be hit with incredibly long, dense paragraphs of text. When you face these, do not try to memorize every single word. Doing that leads to instant cognitive overload. Instead, try to track the speaker's logic as it organically evolves. Listen as they state an initial idea, notice when that idea inevitably hits a problem, catch the new idea that pops up, and then finally lock on to the final decision. Following this logical narrative arc is exactly what keeps you grounded when the audio gets messy. So for example, if we have a question about a student named Sarah and her studies, she might first think about stopping her course entirely. Then, maybe she considers changing it. But finally, she decides to just continue. You must track that specific sequence. Stop, change, continue, so you don't fall for those earlier traps that were really just her temporary doubts. And this is exactly why ruthless elimination is literally your best friend. Don't just look for the right answer. Actively hunt for reasons to cross out the wrong ones. If you systematically work through it, slashing option A because it was mentioned but rejected, crossing out option B because the detail was entirely wrong, you are safely left with option C as the final decision. By confidently eliminating those distractors, your chances of getting the right answer go through the roof, even if you didn't perfectly catch every single word of option C. All right, as we wrap up this explainer, we come to the big one. Section 5, follow meaning, not words. This is the master rule. To succeed, I want you to keep this simple 4-word strategy echoing in your head during the exam. Hear, check, compare, decide. First, hear the possible answer in the audio. Second, rigorously check the surrounding detail and context. Third, compare it directly to what the question is actually asking you. And fourth, only after surviving all of that do you finally make your decision. So I'll leave you with this final thought as you gear up for your next practice session. On test day, are you going to chase words or are you going to follow meaning? Remember, IELTS isn't testing how many raw words you can recognize, it's evaluating how accurately you understand complex, changing information. Leave the keyword chasing in the past, embrace this systematic strategy, and unlock your true potential. You've totally got this.